Robert Schenken, congratulations on the Emmy success of your film All the Way. It's based on the play that you wrote and won a Tony Award for and had a lot of great success on Broadway. And now it's got 8 nominations, including Best TV Movie, which you were nominated for. First off, how does it feel being nominated for an Emmy? It's your 3rd nomination overall from the TV Academy.
Yeah, it's my 2nd time around. I was nominated twice for The Pacific for HBO. But you know, I have to say, Zach, this is kind of special because, as you pointed out to your audience, this began with a play of mine that was very, very successful on Broadway. It won the Tony. Bryan Cranston won the Tony Award, won all the awards that season. And then this process of adaptation with Steven Spielberg and Jay Roach and Brian and myself, and then to be recognized in this way by our peers is extremely gratifying. It's even better than the first time around, for sure.
Well, congratulations again. Excuse me. I wonder if you could talk just a bit about where the idea for this story came from. I mean, what inspired you to write it in the first place?
Sure. Well, you know, I have this little weird family connection with LBJ. My dad, who was a pioneer in public television and radio, was brought down to the University of Texas at Austin to set up the first public television radio station really in the Southwest. And job number 1 was to sit down with then Senator Johnson and get his permission, because it would have been a direct competitor with his own media empire, or should I say Lady Bird's media empire. I'm proud to say that Johnson not only gave his permission, but of course would go on to sign into law the bill that created the Corporation for Public Broadcasting. So in my family growing up, you know, he was one of the good guys. And that election, that 1964 election, first one I really remember. You know, I had the stickers on my school books and my button. And my mother took me down to Congress Avenue to volunteer at the headquarters, and so he was actually an important part of our life there for a while. And he's such a Shakespearean character. I mean, just to the size of the man physically, you know, but also his ambitions, his virtues, his vices. Really an extraordinarily theatrical character. So he's always in my mind as someone who would be a great subject for a stage production, film production. And I was hired by the Oregon Shakespeare Festival to write this play. When we were casting it for Broadway, we needed, we were looking for a star, and the casting director said, so, you know, what are we looking for? And I said, well, there are 2 things that this actor has to be able to do simultaneously. He has to be incredibly charismatic and charming and funny, and he has to be absolutely terrifying. And we just really lucked out that Bryan Cranston, coming off of Breaking Bad, was looking to do some theater, and it was just a match made in heaven. So then Bryan came on board, and we took the show to New York, and then I shared this very early on with Steven Spielberg, who's a longtime colleague. I worked with Steven on The Pacific, and he's, of course, a huge political animal as well as a real lover of history. And he came on immediately just based on the script. And so we put this together and took it to HBO, and they said yes in the room, and we were off to the races. It's really been an extraordinary journey. Things don't often fall together so fast or as well as they did in terms of All the Way.
Mm-hmm. In terms of writing it, you cover an awful lot of ground. I mean, you go from LBJ taking the oath of office to him winning his first presidential election, and in between that, you see the struggles that he had in passing the Civil Rights Act. I wonder, number 1, what made you choose to focus on that particular period of his life? And number 2, if there was anything that happened within that period that you maybe wanted to include, but it just didn't quite fit into your narrative. I mean, what was the decision-making process like?
Yeah, great question. I mean, there is so much exciting stuff to the story of LBJ. I could have written a movie about his first political campaign as a young representative from Texas, sort of a young politician on the rise. Or I could have written a movie about his first Senate campaign, the one that was stolen from him in the last seconds of the election with a handful of fake ballots. Or I could have written about the second Senate campaign, the one he stole in the last moments with a handful of fake ballots. But this year, the accidental president, November 63 to November 64, really has such a beautiful dramatic arc to it. It is, as you point out, he comes into office on the heels of Jack Kennedy's assassination. He's achieved his lifetime goal, but in a way that nobody would ever want that, and has to turn around and run for president himself barely 8 months later. And at the same time, he is facing, and the country is facing, this real moment of moral crisis and reckoning, which is civil rights. And what was he going to do? Was he going to throw in with this, or was he going to play it safe and postpone till after the election? And what he does, shockingly, amazingly, is he goes all in for civil rights. And the story of Johnson's struggle, along with Dr. King, Bob Moses, Ralph Abernathy, and so many other extraordinary civil rights pioneers, is such an amazing triumph, long overdue, and one that's paid in blood, of course. It's just such a fantastic, dramatic arc. So much going on, so many extraordinary characters on both sides of the aisle, that very quickly I settled on this as the story that I wanted to tell about LBJ. And I think, the audience response, first on Broadway and now on television, has been everything you would want from that. It's a really gripping story, and it's, even though we sort of know how it turns out, it sure doesn't feel that way as we're along for the ride. Very, very dramatic stuff, and the kind of thing that actors kill for. And then you look at the cast that we acquired for this, Anthony Mackie and Melissa Leo and Bradley Whitford. It's a pretty great group of people.
It is, and they all have really juicy parts too. I wonder if you could talk a bit about developing those side characters within the orbit of LBJ. I mean, was it difficult to give everyone their, shall we say, moment in the sun? The
real challenge is that there's so much wonderful material, and of course we're operating in a very limited time frame. Just a little over 2 hours, and there's so much that we couldn't get to. So it's really about cherry picking just the very best moments of this. And I have to say, all of these actors, Melissa Leo and Anthony Mackie and Bradley Whitford, Bryan Cranston, of course, everybody was so generous and so involved. Everybody brought something to the table. I don't mean in any kind of prima donna way. I mean, they just really care deeply about their character and about this story, because it seems so important right now. And so everybody brought in really great ideas. Anthony Mackie had some fabulous notes for Dr. King. Bryan was always thinking new business or new work. Melissa Leo just really became Lady Bird. And when you have people operating like that at the very top of their craft, it certainly makes my job as the writer and the executive producer so much easier. But yeah, sure, there were things that we as you always, you couldn't shoot, or things that you shot and we didn't have time to put in. We've got a great B-roll, but fortunately a fantastic A-roll.
You could have almost made like two different movies out of all the material that you probably have. I mean, everything pre-election, everything post-election, everything. There's so much to work with here, and
Yeah,
it is.
no, truly is. There truly is. And I think, the timing is so good right now for this. Here we are in the middle of this extraordinary political season. I mean, it's kind of unbelievable what's going on, and everything that we are fighting over, every subject that you can name, actually has its origins in 1964 and this presidential campaign. It's really kind of shocking in that way. It's really, if you will, the origin story for the 2016 campaign, and I think we all felt that. I know that Stephen did, and Stephen and Jay and Brian and I talked about this a lot, and I think that's part of why the audience is responding to it so powerfully. The story has really had a national conversation, the national political conversation about where we are as a country, about race and power and presidential politics.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, and the Voting Rights Act as well. That being gutted in certain states. It really is extraordinary to see the struggle that went into fighting for this, and then
Yes.
see it now.
Yes, no, and I mean, it's not, it's nothing we can ever take for granted. The Voting Rights Act and 65 Voting Rights Act, of course, would come in the next year. And as you just pointed out, the Supreme Court just gutted the 65 Voting Rights Act only 8 months ago. And almost immediately, you saw various states, not too surprisingly, most of them southern states, immediately began to make it harder to vote. It's a kind of shocking thing that in 2016 we're still fighting the same battle, but here we are, and of course that's just the way it is. Progress is never a given, and you have to keep moving forward. You can never stop.
Absolutely. I wanted to talk to you a bit about some of the changes that you made in translating it from the stage to the screen. Now, obviously,
Yeah.
you've written in both feature films and television and the stage, so you understand they're completely different animals. Talk a bit about the changes that you made.
Well, I was so grateful for the opportunity to revisit this story on any number of levels. I bounce back and forth a lot between film and television and theater, and feel very comfortable moving in between. Of course, the big advantage or difference for telling the story on television is both the ability to kind of do the epic, big widescreen cinematographic experience, and then also to get really, really close and intimate in a way that you just can never do on stage. And when you have an actor like Bryan Cranston, such a transformative actor, somebody who disappears into his character and then gives you so much just with a look. A big part of my job is how much of the story can we tell just with the look, just with Bryan's face, and give us as much of that as possible. And then there were opportunities to do fun stuff that we just couldn't do on stage. I mean, for instance, the scene with the aqua car, where President Johnson drives his car into the lake with Hubert Humphrey on board. In the play, that was just a scene that took place in the Oval Office. Well, I was been reading so much about LBJ, and he actually used to do this. He had an aqua car that could operate on the land, and then in the water be a boat. And he would drive people around on his ranch, giving them a big tour, and then he would pretend to lose control of the car, and he would drive into the lake. And he just thought this was hilarious. And I read that, and I thought, oh, my God, well, we've got to put that in the movie. I mean, that's such a movie moment. So it's things like that you look for, and you read them, and you go, oh, my God, well, that's got to be in. And it was so wonderful for what it did for that moment, which, in quintessential LBJ methodology. You know, it's all about putting the person he's massaging, he's working on, off balance so he can get what he wants. And in this case, he nearly puts future Vice President Hubert Humphrey underwater in order to get him off balance. And you just look constantly for things like that. You know, it's really, you would certainly recognize the story from the play version, but it's a complete cinematic reimagining. This is what I said to everybody going in, this is what I want to do. It's what everybody brought on for. And I'm going to be immodest for a moment, Zach, and I will say that as we went into the first screening of this at the LA premiere, Spielberg pulled me aside and said, you know, I just want you to know this is the best stage to screen adaptation I've ever seen in my life. Wow. And I'm gonna take that, put that in my back pocket and keep that with me close for a long, long time. That was a good moment. That was a good moment. But I feel like I feel it was earned. I think we really did transform the story here. I mean, if you look at the beginning of this and look at the beginning of the stage version, there's a radically different way of getting into the story and telling the story. And I think very exciting way at that. I feel very good about it.
Well, it certainly helps when you have somebody like Jay Roach involved, who's the go-to guy for these HBO political movies. What was that collaboration like between the two of you?
Oh, gosh. Jay Roach is just the best. I didn't know Jay before this. I mean, I knew his work, of course. And it was Stephen who actually suggested Jay. And so I flew down to New Orleans where Jay was shooting a movie with Brian. As
Trumbo, right?
Yeah, Trumbo. And so I went down. So that's where I first met Jay. Was on the set of Trumbo while he was working with Brian. And I sat there and watched him work. And then we had lunch and talked. And you know, the thing about Jay that everybody in Hollywood will tell you is a extraordinarily talented guy, you know, many strings to his bow. If you look at the range of his work from those now contemporary classic comedies to these very, very specific nitty-gritty political things that he's done for HBO, that's quite a range. But he's also just the nicest, most collaborative guy you could possibly work with. Jay, like myself, and I think like Brian, thinks that you know, the way to make good work is to get the best people you can in the room and then slug it out and let the best idea wins. You know, I mean, I'll claim credit for it later, but in the moment, I'm only interested in the best idea, and that's what Jay is like. You know, some directors not so comfortable having the writer in the room. Jay is the antithesis of that. I was there with Jay throughout the pre-production, all the design meetings, casting, certainly location scout, then every day on the set for 28 days, and contributing to every version as we did the editing process. And throughout that, he just maintains this really warm, inviting kind of, well, what do you think? What's your idea about this? How do you feel about this? Not that Jay doesn't have very, very strong feelings himself. He does. But I would work with Jay Roach in a second. And I think we all are. He just makes a set that's so inviting. And I think everybody felt that way. It just makes everybody feel, yeah, sure, why not? You know, this whole notion of why not? Great work with Jay. I would work with him in a second.
I hope you two get to do it again soon. So I wanted to ask you, you won a Pulitzer Prize for your play, The Kentucky Circles, or the name escaped me for a moment.
Kentucky Cycle, yes.
Kentucky Cycle, yes. I wonder if you could talk a little bit about what that kind of recognition meant for you. I mean, obviously this is a very prestigious literary prize. Well,
Pulitzer Prize, yeah. It was certainly a highlight in my career. There's no question about it. It was also, his made history in a way, because it was the first time in the history of the Pulitzer Prize, 78 plus years at that time, that a play had won without a New York production first. I won the Pulitzer, and then we came into New York, which was a very different kind of event. It's a very unique recognition, and it puts you in very rarefied company, for which I will always be very proud and very grateful for. What is nice is that it opened doors for me in the film and television world, and ever since then, while I've certainly kept a foot in the theater world, I've been very, very involved and very fortunate with the people I've worked with. I have All the Way obviously running right now, and I have a new movie, a feature film, coming out November 4th, Hacksaw Ridge, directed by Mel Gibson, and starring Andrew Garfield, which is a fantastic film. So I'm having a good moment here. And yes, it did begin with the Kentucky Cycle and the Pulitzer Prize.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, and congratulations again on the Emmy nomination. Wish you success on Emmy night, and can't wait to see Hacksaw Ridge. So,
thank you, Zach. It's great to talk to you as well. Look forward to it.
Thank you. Have a great day.
Bye-bye.